Hey guys, welcome to my Sew Bliss. Today I'm super excited to be partnering up with Baby Lock Sewing Machines and bringing you another sewing tutorial. Today's going to be a little bit different than my other sewing tutorials. Usually I walk you through a project and show you exactly how to do it. But I wanted to go a little bit more basic this time and show you and explain to you, if you are a beginner to sewing, you know nothing about sewing, how to get started. I was talking to a lady recently and she said her daughter wants to learn to sew and she has no idea where to start. So that's where the idea for this video came from. And I was like, okay, where do you start when you know nothing about sewing and you want to get started sewing? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be showing you guys the Baby Lock Zest, which is this machine right here. This is a great beginner machine, especially if you have a young child that wants to learn to sew. This is going to be a great machine to start on. It's not overwhelming. It has all the stitches that you would need for all the basic projects, all the things to get started. It's also really lightweight and great to carry around or travel with. So even if you're not a beginner, it's great just to take up and down the stairs, or if you like to travel with the machine, that is also a great one to have. So let's get started. I'll share with you some of my top tips and ways for you to get started sewing. So the first thing that you're going to need to do before you start a sewing project or start learning how to sew is you're going to need a few supplies. Obviously, first you're going to need a sewing machine. We're not sewing by hand, at least most of my projects are not sewn by hand, maybe a step or two, but that's it. So you're gonna need some sort of sewing machine. And like I said earlier, I am using the Baby Lock Zest. This is a wonderful machine for a beginner. I'll put links down below for it so you guys can go and check it out. And I'll also put links down below with all the projects that I've done with this machine. But most of the projects that I do, I can do with this machine. I do a lot of clothing sewing and bag making, and this has all the things that I need. It's really, like I said, a basic machine and perfect for beginners. Then you're going to need a few sewing supplies. You could start by buying a sewing kit. There's all different kinds of kits. I can put links down below for those as well, from like a fabric store or the large store like Joann's, somewhere like that. Even Walmart, I think, has good sewing kits. So things that you'll find in a sewing kit are going to be some scissors. These are just like little snip scissors. So I like to cut threads with this. Usually when I'm cutting fabric for clothing or bigger pieces of fabric, you're going to want bigger, sharper scissors, and that's where these shears come in. These are Gingers, and they're really nice quality. Great if you are going to be sewing for a long time. So that's a good option. But again, if you're just wanting something small and basic, there's also cheaper options. But just some big scissors to use to cut your fabric, that's going to be something like that would work. Another thing that's going to be in a sewing kit is going to be a seam gauge, which is this right here. It's pretty much a small ruler, and you can move this, but it's perfect, especially when you're starting out. You're going to be learning all the different math parts of sewing, like what your seam allowance is, which is the amount that you sew in from the edge and is not seen. So this helps you gauge how much that is. Usually if you're sewing clothing, it's going to be like 5/8 of an inch. Sometimes it's 1/2 of an inch. Sometimes it's 1/4 of an inch. So this is really helpful. If you don't know where that is, you can line it up and figure it out. Then another thing, seam ripper, because we all make mistakes. I am always making mistakes. So if you're a beginner and feel like you're always making mistakes, don't feel bad, because even people who have been doing it for years are still making mistakes. So you want a good quality seam ripper. I like this one. It's cushioned, but I have a few others because I always lose them too. So it's nice to have more than one, but most sewing kits will come with that. And then pins as well, and a pin cushion. Sometimes it comes with that. Sometimes they just come in like a little box. But I have a nice variety in here right now. I really like these flat ones when I'm cutting out my patterns, but then the blue ones are going to be glass head ones. And those ones are nice because if you iron over them, they won't melt. Whereas these flat ones would melt if I ironed over them. So there's gonna be a lot of options when you go find these sewing tools. Don't get overwhelmed by them. Just buy what you like best, and then as you go, you kind of learn, okay, for this project I'm gonna need something like this, or like for the pins, I can't iron over that one melted, or something like that. So it's going to be a learning process no matter what. And I feel like even after 10 plus years of sewing, I am still learning different tips and tricks and ways to do things, and there's always new tools coming out. So don't get overwhelmed by that. Then you're going to need your thread. And usually I always have white on hand, and a lot of times I'm just sewing with white thread. It's just basic and easy for me, but as you can see back here, I have a wall of color of thread too. So this, I just buy it like Joann's. You can buy nicer quality thread, but to get started, I say just buy a little spool at Joann's, whatever color you want, unless you have a project and fabric in mind already. So those are some of the basic tools that you would find in a sewing kit. There might be some other ones, but just start out with the basics and then go from there. And one thing, I have taught sewing classes a few times, and one thing that I like to do, if you've never sewn before, the very first thing after you thread a sewing machine, which if you've never done that, I'll put a link down below for that as well, I just have them sew on a piece of paper, and I let them go wild and sew however and whatever they want on a piece of paper. It might dull the needle a little bit in your sewing machine, so you might want to switch it out later, but other than that, it's not going to be harmful at all to your sewing machine. And it's a great way to start and just see how stitches work, see the different types of stitches. And like I said, when I have my students do this, I just have them sit down at a sewing machine and sew, and they can play around. They can try different stitches. They can try different knobs to see what they do. So I'm going to start and show you a little bit of that over at the sewing machine. Once you're sitting in front of your sewing machine, you can look around before even turning it on and touching it and just see what you can recognize. If there's anything you actually already know what it does, that's wonderful. If not, you can also look in a manual, you can watch a video. I have lots of videos on all the different sewing machines that I've used and the different features on them. But that's why I like having my students just sit down and start sewing and play around, because it helps them get to know the sewing machine better. But for this sewing machine, just to give you a little bit of an idea, every sewing machine is going to be a little bit different, but every sewing machine will have a place for you to select what kind of stitch you want to do, and then also adjust the length and the width usually, but that on this machine goes with the selecting knob. It helps select the width. And then it will also have a place for you to do a back stitch. So that's what this knob right here is. And a back stitch essentially just locks in those stitches, so it's harder for them to come out later on, and your project won't fall apart. So those are important. But other than that, you don't really need to worry about anything else. If you just pull the sewing machine out of a box, it should be ready to go. All you have to learn is how to thread it. It's different on every sewing machine, but they're all pretty similar. So I will put a link down below for my videos on how to thread this sewing machine and other sewing machines that I have done. So once that's done, and just so you know, I'll give you a heads up, you'll have your top thread, and then it comes down and underneath somehow, and again, it's different every one, but this one, it's a metal clasp that you open, and the bobbin is in there. So every machine will have a bobbin, a bottom thread, and a top thread. So I'm just going to take my paper. I took a marker and just drew some lines on it, because that's also a great way to get started, and also practicing straight lines and curved lines. I mean, usually you'll just do straight lines, but depending on the project, it could be different. So for right now, I'll just go over here. I'm going to put my presser foot down. This is your presser foot right here, and usually there's a lever on the back that you can reach and go. And usually when you get started, you want to hold those threads in the back and just start sewing. So it's a little bit louder because it's going through the paper, but you can see my stitches are coming through, and I can even press my back stitch and it'll go back and then forward. And I can just play around with it, go faster, slower. For this machine, it just depends on how hard you're pressing the foot pedal. That's gonna decide how fast you go. And then to get it out of here, you're gonna wanna make sure your needle is up every time you do that. And then you lift your presser foot and pull this out, and then we'll trim our threads. So here you can see this thread got kind of sewn over, so I can just pull that through. But then I can go and look at the stitches. You can kind of see how it works. So it does a little stitch and picks up the thread on the bottom. So this is the back of it. So that's always a fun way to start sewing, is just seeing how it actually works. And then when I'm done with that part and done playing around, you can practice on your straight lines. And this is a great time to see how well you can do it straight. And then practice pivoting, which is just leaving your needle down and then sewing again. Okay, so once you've done that for about 10-15 minutes, however long you feel comfortable, you can do that. You could also, if you don't even want to start with paper, you could just grab some fabric and start sewing on that and just play around on some fabric. Once you've gotten comfortable doing a little bit of sewing, then like I said, you could start sewing on some fabric. You could do practice runs and just do random stitches all over the fabric. You could sew two pieces together. Usually when you're sewing them, they're going to be right sides. So the right sides of the fabric that you want facing out and to be seen, you want those placed together. And then you can sew a line together and see how that works. So really the first step in sewing, I feel like, is just playing around with it. Let them have fun, and then do a little bit of everything so that you kind of see what your machine can do and you feel a little bit more comfortable doing that. Once you are done with that, you can then go ahead and pick a project. And I suggest a small, easy project to start with, something like an apron, a pillowcase, maybe a little tote bag that's simple and easy. So you just want to start slow. And then as you continue to do different projects, you're learning different skills and different things that you can add into your sewing. So just start small with those small, easy beginner projects, and then slowly you can work your way up and up. And I'll put links down below for some of those easier beginner projects that I have done. And I can even suggest some. If you have any questions, please let me know. But overall, as a sewing beginner, I say just start slow and have fun with it. Don't stress too much about it being perfect, and just try out different techniques. Try out your sewing machine so you kind of get to know each other a little bit, become best friends with it. And just have fun. One thing that I really love about YouTube and the internet and Pinterest is that you can find so many projects and so many free patterns. So I say start there, and then you can get introduced into bigger and harder patterns. And again, a lot of sewists will post what they love to sew, and then you get more ideas and find more companies and more patterns. And so it keeps going and going and going. So don't get overwhelmed with all the options and ideas. Just start small. Start with something you want to do, because if it's something you want to do, I feel like you'll want to keep trying and going. So don't get frustrated. Sewing is such a fun activity and hobby to have, and I really highly recommend it for everyone to try at least once in their life. So like I said before, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them down below in the comment section. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can find all of my videos again and see all the tutorials that I'll be sharing with you. You can also check out the Baby Lock Zest at the link down below in the description. I'll put all the information down there for that. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!